Get ready for a clash of titans. It's Alireza Firouzja versus Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, two of the most dynamic and creative players on the planet in a high-stakes strategic showdown. And we're off. Firouzja opens with pawn to e4, met by MVL's Sicilian defense. White opts for a closed, strategic King's Indian attack setup with d3 and queen to e2, avoiding early fireworks. Both sides continue developing methodically. We see fianchettos from both white and black, but Firouzja stakes a claim on the queen side with a pawn push to a4, looking to gain space. The middle game battle lines are drawn. White plays pawn to e5, fixing the central pawn structure and forcing black's knight to h7. Now the strategic maneuvering begins in earnest. Black strikes back in the center with a pawn push to f5. This provokes a response, and after white captures en passant on f6, black recaptures, opening up the f-file for future attacks. And now Maxime Vachier-Lagrave stirs the pot with a daring pawn push to g5. He's creating chaos on the king side, but Firouzja meets it coolly, trading pawns and planting his bishop firmly on e5. And now, queen to g7 from MVL, a brilliant and deep sacrificial idea looking to completely disrupt white's coordination. And here's the point. The bishop comes to g4, challenging white's key defender. After bishop takes bishop on e5, the knight recaptures on e5, and the other knight hops back to f6 to join the attack. The dust settles for a moment. White exchanges bishops on f6, and black's rook recaptures. Firouzja repositions his knight to h2 for defense, while MVL's rook swings to h6, eyeing the king side. But look at this, a brilliant counter-sacrifice. Firouzja plays knight to g4, fighting fire with fire to trade off black's dangerous attacking knight and blow open lines for his own pieces. Black has no choice. The knight on g4 is snapped off immediately, and the queen recaptures on g4. A fantastic move, and the only one that keeps white's advantage, setting a very subtle trap. Black's knight jumps into the center at e5, looking to cause problems, but this walks right into white's idea. And queen to e2, another incredibly precise and only move from Firouzja, sidestepping the threat and keeping his plan alive. Black's knight moves to c6, but white's plan is in motion. The knight calmly drops to f1, and with black's pawn on g4, white begins to press on the other side of the board with a push to a5. A long period of maneuvering follows. White fixes the queen side with a pawn to a6, activates the rook to d1, and repositions the queen to d2, slowly tightening the screws on black's position. Black is under pressure and looking for a plan, but makes a passive move here. There was a much more active defense. The best try was to push the pawn to d4, creating immediate counterplay. After rook to c1, the queen can swing to h8, queen to e2, and queen to h5, keeping the game very much alive. But in the game, the knight simply retreats to b8, a quiet move that hands the initiative completely over to white, and Firouzja pounces. The d-pawn marches forward to d4, seizing the center. Rooks swing to a1 and then to e5, building up immense pressure all over the board. Black is being squeezed. The rooks and minor pieces continue to dance around the board. White's rooks probe on h4 and e5, while black's pieces are forced into a defensive posture, trying to hold everything together. The final pieces are moving into position for the decisive blow. White's knight lands on e3, the queen shifts to e2, and a final pawn move to b3 prepares the stage for a spectacular finish. And here, black makes a critical mistake, getting greedy and allowing a winning combination. The defense required more patience. Keeping the bishop on d7 was essential. Then, after pawn takes c4, pawn takes c4, queen to b2, and queen to f8, black is still holding on. Instead of that, the bishop snaps up the pawn on a6, and this tactical oversight will prove fatal. White immediately cashes in. Pawns are exchanged on c4, and then the white queen swings all the way over to a2, joining the attack on the queen side and eyeing black's vulnerable king. Black is in deep trouble, and this next move is another inaccuracy that allows white's brilliant finale. A better defense was available. The best try was bishop to b5. After queen takes pawn on a7 with check, king to g8, queen to b6, and bishop to d7, black could still fight. But back in the game, the bishop retreats to c8, and that is the final mistake needed for white's attack to crash through. Here it is, a brilliant sacrifice. Knight takes the pawn on d5, a stunning blow that shatters black's central defenses and rips the position wide open, and black recaptures with the pawn on d5, but this is not the best defense and only accelerates the collapse. Recapturing with the knight would have put up more resistance. The attack flows naturally. The queen immediately swoops in to take the pawn on a7 with check. Under this relentless pressure, black slips again. The king is in mortal danger and needs to run. The best escape was king to f8 immediately. After queen to c5 check, king to f7, queen to c7 check, and king back to f8, the king is safer. But in the game, the bishop blocks on d7, and this allows white to continue the demolition. Unbelievable! A second brilliant sacrifice. Bishop takes the pawn on d5 with check. Firouzja is tearing down the house, and this move completely demolishes black's remaining defenses. Forced again, black's knight must recapture the bishop on d5, and the follow-up is perfectly precise. Queen takes the bishop on d7 with check, the only move that continues this incredible winning sequence. The knight is forced to block the check, coming to e7. The assault continues. Rook to f5 with check. Another powerful move in this flawless combination. Black's only move is to interpose the rook on f6, but the end is near. And now, the final nail in the coffin. Rook takes the pawn on g4. The only move, and the one that cashes in on this spectacular attack. The point is this unstoppable sequence. If rook takes the rook on f5, white's rook takes the queen on g7 with check. The king recaptures on g7, and the queen takes the rook on e8, winning a full rook and the game. MVL tries one last desperate shot with queen to h8, hoping for a miracle. But there are no miracles here. Firouzja simplifies with rook takes rook on f6 with check, and all resistance is over. And here, black makes one final slip in a hopeless position, accelerating the end. There was a slightly more stubborn defense. Queen takes rook on f6, rook to f4, queen takes rook on f4, pawn takes queen on f4, king to f8. But in the actual game, the king recaptures the rook on f6, stepping into even more danger. White plays rook to h4, which is completely winning, but, believe it or not, there was an even more precise way to finish the game. The fastest win was queen to d6 check. After king to f5, rook to f4 check, king to g5, and queen to e6, it's over immediately. But in the game, Firouzja plays rook to h4, and in this totally lost position, black has seen enough. White wins. After a breathtaking sacrificial attack, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave resigned. The position is completely hopeless, and here's just one of the lines he would have seen coming. Queen to g8, rook to f4, check knight to f5, queen takes knight on f5, check king to e7,